Welcome to the Healing Courageously podcast, where we engage in open, honest, and healthy conversation about everything from addiction, abuse, and recovery to marriage, family, and spirituality. We hope you find this podcast helpful. Our goal is that you will find a new way of living as you look closer at yourself in these areas of your life, which will lead to a happier and healthier you. Now here's your host, Randy Boyd.
Greetings and welcome to this episode of Healing Courageously. And today I have the executive director and founder of True North Retreats with me, Nathaniel Blackburn. Welcome, Nathaniel. I appreciate you showing up today and being a part of this.
Man, Randy, it's an honor. I appreciate the invitation, and anytime something like this presents itself, man, I know it's important to say yes and be a part of the healing process, not only for myself, but expressing through corporate vulnerability, man, to hopefully soften the hearts and walks of other men.
Yeah, and that's the key right here, is the hearts of other men that don't have, a lot of men don't feel they have a place to speak their voice safely. Is a key thing. So, you know, yeah. I like the opening you have on your website. It says, "Are you living for your identity or from your identity?" You know, and that's my identity for a long time, and I'm sure you can elaborate on this a little more. Was what happened to me was who I was, what I was doing, being a successful businessman was who I was, and the reality is, that's not our true identity. It's what happened to us, and it's what we do.
Yeah, you know, I think, man, I hear that and I relate to that in a lot of ways. You know, one of the challenges that we propose to the men that come out on our retreats is that exact question. And you don't know until you know. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not just Nathaniel Blackburn, you know, that was molested as a kid, recovering alcoholic, drug addict, blah, blah, fill in the blank, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we believe, you know, from our faith perspective, man, that we're sons of God, and mm-hmm. and that's the truth. Now, the things that happen to us along the way, that's just parts of our story. Yeah. They're not, you know, who we are, like you just said. And then again, on the flip side of it, because I'm built insecure, this is me, right? Mm-hmm. I've got an insecurity as it relates to my childhood and all these different things that came up that just says, Nathaniel, you're not enough, mm-hmm. right? And so then I can flip it, and my identity is then in what I bring to the table, right? Or where I live, or what is my job, right? What are all these other things that just are things? And if those are my identity, then I'm setting myself up for failure, because I'll never truly be known. You know, to truly be known is the scariest thing in the world. But when my identity is rooted in my faith, then when you don't accept me, I'm still going to be okay, mm-hmm. Because I'm rooted and grounded in that.
Right. You know, we talk about that, the identity part, and just real quick, because I want you talking more to me. But in 2011, I had this business I started. It was 21 years old. And we chose to, because of the economy crash, we were liquid, but we chose to shut the doors. And I'd done a lot of work in my recovery on Randy. You know, who is Randy? Who's this? And I thought I was pretty stable. But when I made the decision finally to shut the doors for the next year, I had no idea who I was. It was the hardest year of my life. And I had people telling me, Randy, we don't know you as a business owner. We know you as a recovery person. But I didn't know myself. And so it was that first year after shutting that business down was tough. But through friends and fellowship with the right people, you eventually find it, and I think it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think for a performance-based individual like myself, right? The manipulation I learned at a young age on how to present what the people in the room needed to see to either leave me alone or accept me. Like that deep down inside goes, okay, Nathaniel, you're on this journey of identity. You're on this journey, but there's a finish line somewhere along the way. And if you check enough of these boxes, you will land at this arrival point. And I love that you said it's a journey, because it is, and that's it. This whole thing is, man, are you in process? Right? Like we say on our website, unplug with purpose. Like, are you available to the process, or are you being run by false identities of the world and insecurities, fear, and then the other end of the spectrum, pride, right? Self-righteousness, right? Like we suffer from a selfish and self-centeredness, right? Well, there's a lot of other forms of self that land in there that I had to get sober first and then do some more work to realize, wait a minute, not only am I selfish and self-centered, dude, I am insecure, I'm self-righteous, right? I'm self-seeking, you fill in the blank on my own.
Right.
The process is a battle against my true identity and self. Some people call sin, we call it self. It's exactly the same thing.
Right, exactly. So what I want to do is I want to dive into you a little bit. Okay, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to True North.
Ooh, how long is the podcast?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
No, I know. I'm just like you. It's like, how much time do I got?
That's that self-righteous part, right?
I want to say one thing. I'm sorry, Nathaniel. I had COVID back in September, and so it still messes with my mind once in a while. It's weird. Where it's like I'll just forget something, and I got to let it sit for a minute. It comes back. But we're talking about, like guys like you and I, we have a purpose in our life. And I finally figured mine out. I was at the Rock Church over here in San Diego, and I opened up a book, and Genesis 50:20, I read. What man meant for harm, God meant for good. He brought you to this place to save the lives of many men. That was my purpose right there. That was my answer. So that I wanted to say, I lost it for a minute, but I wanted to say it before I forgot it again.
I love it, man. I love that, Randy. And anything that points back to scripture, man, I can't believe that I'm even saying this out loud, but I love that. Yeah. I was such a lost man, and still can be, right? I want to just say this first and foremost before I go any farther. Man, I'm in process, right? I do not have it all together. I never will have it all together. I'm a man that my faith is the most important thing in my life today. Yet I still struggle with unbelief.
Yep.
I want that to be clear, because I don't have it together. I do. My faith today is more defined. It's more a part of my life than it ever has been before. And that's the process that I choose to move towards through spiritual practices and disciplines. All that to be said, man, it took a butt-kicking journey to finally surrender, and surrender to the steps, right? The steps that said, hey, man, this is about a relationship with a higher power. And I was like, I tried that a few times, and I'm not good enough for that higher power, essentially, right? Like, I grew up in Virginia. Earliest memories for me, I don't really have. I've got this pretty grandiose story of abandonment and trauma as a kid. And I try to be careful sharing that, because I don't want men who, my mom left when I was 7. I was molested by a neighbor multiple times. My dad raised me by himself and died when I was 15. Those 3 things in and of themselves, we could spend the podcast on. Well, I never looked at any of that stuff. And, it obviously shows up later in my life when I find an identity in drinking and drugs. But what I want to say, and I want men to hear this, my story is not the majority, right? I have these big, gaping, traumatic wounds. And I think the biggest fail that we have as a community is not recognizing our wounds, because they're not big wounds like mine. Right. And so, man, a guy's dad that was a workaholic and was never home and never affirmed him through loving words and affirmation, that trauma is equal to being molested.
Absolutely.
It just lands, right? It lands different.
Absolutely.
And so, true north is a place that God led me to create to help cross that really wide chasm between guys that have massive obvious trauma and the guys that sit over in the corner and go, man, Nathaniel, that sounds terrible that happened for you, but I can't relate, and I want to hopefully help guys give God space to speak into their hearts around their wounds, around their fears, around their, right, fill in the blank, all these things that are landing hard on us as men as we try to suit up and show up to be accepted.
Yep.
And so I went chasing identity, as a young boy, and my grandmother took over for my father when he died when I was 15. And pardon me, she was she was a believer, but was kind of hellfire and brimstone, and didn't have a great presentation of God to me, and it made me just not want anything to do with God. I saw some hypocrisy in her life, and hellfire and brimstone, guilt and shame, and all this stuff. And I was like, man, if that's God, I don't think I really want anything to do with it. Little did I know that God was with me the whole time. But I went off in search of something. Right, I left high school at 17 and got into college, and went to college at Virginia Military Institute. I think that was the first time God worked on my behalf without me knowing it, getting me into a military structured academy that really would set the table for a long time around some of the things I learned around organization and structure. And that's another time for another podcast. But my senior year at college, I had been formulating a great drinking career at this point. I can remember when alcohol entered my story in high school, all the voices inside that said, hey, Nathaniel, man, you're not enough, went away. And I didn't know that at the time. This is all stuff that I can say now in retrospect, right, as we look in the rearview mirror of sobriety. And I felt good. I didn't feel scared. I felt confidence. I was funny. I learned that if I could be the funniest guy in the room, then you'd accept me. So I worked really hard at that identity as the funny drinking guy. And senior year in high school, our senior year in college, MTV was on location in Virginia taking auditions for a TV show called The Real World. Back in the late 90s, man, The Real World was kind of the jam. It was the first reality show on TV, and it was cool. Everybody wanted to do it. I remember thinking, man, my story's really messed up. I bet they would love my story. And so I applied for the show, and I really lived up, beefed up the, abandonment of my mom and my father's death. I still never shared about them being molested. I didn't share about being molested until the last time I got sober. The first time I got sober, if I'm honest, right? It's the last and first true time. But I kind of used that manipulation tactics and got all the way through 6 months of an interview process and got on the show. And that launched me into a career of film and television that just prolonged my fall, because I had access to whatever, whenever, money, fame, notoriety, identity, all that stuff fueled me for a really long time. And as it stopped working, the abuse kicks in, cocaine, crack, right? Fill in the blanks, the story.
Yep.
Took me to homelessness, took me to lost every relationship, physically lost careers, money, right? You name it. I lost everything you could literally lose, but it never was enough. It took me 15 years to get sober. I ended up in Los Angeles, was working in film and television, was down to 145 pounds. Brother came out to see me and just started crying. And girlfriend caught me lying, cheating, stealing again that next night from her yet again, right? Stealing to go get high, and kicked me out. Had nowhere to go. Brother came to the rescue, flew me to Denver, Colorado, and went to my first 12-step meeting. Mind you, there was all this, fame and money and all this crap before that. And I went to a meeting and they were talking about heroin, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not an addict because I haven't done heroin. I was so lost.
Typical addict.
Yeah, dude, I went looking for reasons I'm not like them.
Right.
Those next 11 years, man, were the darkest points of my life. Again, back to homelessness. Eventually, after 3 DUIs and multiple just bottoms, right? All these bottoms that I don't want to get into. They were just terrible. Led me to my 3rd DUI and up in Vail, Colorado, where I was living. And man, I turned to God a handful of times in that 11-year period as it relates to the 12 steps. And I'd heard from God and I had spiritual experiences, and but I kept relapsing. And the message that comes in during those relapses, well, you tried God and it didn't work because you're a real POS, And I believed that for a long, long time. I woke up in jail in April of 2015, probably going to be going to jail after this 3rd DUI. And I can't explain it, Randy. I woke up in that jail cell, and I have had every physical, emotional, mental bottom you can have along the way, right? But that morning in jail, it was the first time that I can go, hey, God pulled the curtain back for me and showed me what was next. I used to judge people who committed suicide. I used to really kind of belittle them as selfish. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That morning in jail, I woke up and it was next. And out of nowhere, right? I never considered it, never thought of it, but suicide was next. And I knew it, in that moment. I can't explain it other than I knew it was next. And I got on my knees in jail that day and I said, God, I don't know if you're real, and if you are, you probably want nothing to do with me because I'm a real piece of crap. It's not what I said. I said something else, but a real piece of crap. But I don't want to kill myself. And if you could help me, I'll do whatever you need me to do. But I really need some help. I got released from jail four hours later on a personal recognizance bond, which I didn't even know existed. And Randy, I started walking. Vail, Colorado is this beautiful place that people go on vacation to. Well, if you ever get in trouble in Vail, Colorado, you have to go to this little town called Eagle, Colorado, 30 minutes away. You go to Eagle for 3 things. You're either flying out of that really nice airport, you are getting barbecue, which is great barbecue there, or you got to go to court. You got in trouble. And the Wednesday morning in this court is about a mile and a half down this road to nowhere. And I'm walking down this road to nowhere to the roundabout, right, to go get on the bus to go 30 miles back to Vail and get my car out of impound. And I'd been going to AA on and off for 11 years. I had multiple identities. I was sober and lying and then sneaking out and drinking. And I built this one friendship with this young guy named Devin. And he and I would have hung out outside of recovery. That's how we hit it off, in recovery, snowboarder like me. And he was way into cars, and this will make sense in a minute. Bear with me. Up in the mountains, he had a Subaru that was like jacked up and had a muffler on it that was like, really loud, aggressive, obnoxious muffler. And I only say that is whenever he would come over to my house to pick me up to go to a meeting, or we'd go snowboard, and I'd hear him coming like a mile away and be like, oh, he's coming. So I'd go out, meet him in the street. Well, I'm walking down this road, Randy, and 4 hours before I got on my knees out of this gift of desperation, of suicidal thoughts, asking God to come into my life. 4 hours later, I'm walking down this road, and I'm thinking about, man, how am I going to get out of this? So in 4 short hours, the old self, Nathaniel, the manipulator, the scared guy, is trying to figure out how to get out of this. And out of nowhere, I hear ring, 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 ring. And I'm like, oh no, that's Devin. I've got to hide. And in a split second, Randy, like, it felt like 10 years. In a split second, I was running through, how do I hide? How do I not let him see me? If he sees me, the cat's out of the bag. Like, I'm not, they think I'm sober. I'm not. DUI. And then there was this little quiet voice that said, or ask for help. I was like, before I could react, I walked out in the street, started waving Devin down. He pulled up, and I've been sober ever since, right? Like, there's a lot more to the story after the fact, but that was the beginning of a true surrender. I stayed up there for a year and got sober and did the work, honestly, for the first time. Shared about being molested and did it out of spite, really. Randy, I'd done the steps, 4 steps multiple times in 11 years and always left that off. And I knew that my sponsor was going to show me my part in whatever I was going to put down on there. And so almost out of spite, I was like, show me my part, buddy, in getting molested as a 5-year-old. I dare you. And I said that to him, and he didn't even miss a beat. He goes, well, your part was holding on to that and keeping it a secret for 30 years, Nathaniel. Whoa! The tears. He's right.
Yeah.
And, anyway, man, I got sober, and God was becoming a pretty big part of my life in that recovery. He removed the desire for me to drink and get high somewhere in that first year. And if you're listening to this and you know what I'm talking about, then there's your proof that God exists. Okay? Because I couldn't get rid of it. And I tried everything possible, and I couldn't get rid of it. And so I was all in on God. Didn't know who he was really yet, but I was all in. And I started saying, hey, man, I told you I'm yours. What do you need me to do? And a freaking job opportunity presented itself in Dallas, Texas. Mind you, I'm living in Vail, Colorado, and Dallas, Texas, man. I'm like, I looked up and was like, really, God? Dallas, Texas? And by that time in my walk, man, I knew to just respond. And so a couple weeks later, I was gone, moved to Dallas, worked in the field of recovery here for 3 years. Truly was a boot camp meant for mental health for me in a lot of ways. Like, I was working in it, but God was working on me. I tell people today that God wanted me to get sober in the mountains so that he could bring me to Texas to introduce me to Jesus, and show me the rest of the story, right? To bring healing around the trauma, to bring healing around the abandonment, all that stuff, to wake up to the lies and messages that I've told myself my entire life that aren't true, that are based out of those experiences, to ultimately, give my life to Christ and step out on another limb of faith and walk away from a great job and career in mental health and recovery to start a ministry, True North Retreats, which is, like I said, a place for guys to disconnect from the leashes of cell phones and day-to-day activities, to quiet the noise of this world, to give God space to speak into our hearts, to help us realign our spiritual compass to what's true. Because when we can do that, I go home and I'm a better husband. I'm not so quick to react. So,
wow. I mean, there's
sorry.
there's a lot of parallels to yours and mine's story. I was raised in a born again Christian family, being molested by and physically, emotionally, spiritually abused by my stepfather, who was a deacon in the church. My mother was a member of the choir. All that, but we could go on and on, like you say, about that, and it's. But here's what really hit me, right? That you're in jail, and God finally pulled the curtain back to you. On you. Same thing happened to me. I wasn't in jail, but I was getting ready for a hunting trip. The short story is that he had him whisper in my ear, And I knew it was God. He says, Randy, your get out of jail free cards are all used up. And I knew exactly only God could say those words to me, because He'd known how many times I'd called Him in the past. God, help me out of this. And I got out of it. He was always there for me. But this one time He said, your get out of jail free cards are used up. I said, oh. And that was all it took. And then about, I went to treatment with the outpatient at Betty Ford, but about probably a week or two into it, same thing that you did. I got down on my knees and said, God, I can't do this. I need your help, And I wanted nothing to do with God or the church for 38 years because of what had happened to me. So, I mean, it's like you say, for those that are listening out there, I think the big thing is to understand, and I know you do, and I do, is we understand that a lot of people have a problem with God.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. I'll say rightfully so. But it can be reconciled with an open mind and being willing, and it will change your life. But like you and I, it's a process. It just doesn't happen with a snap of a finger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, Randy, I love that we keep going back to the process part. Like, my story and your story are exactly what God knew that we needed to come to the end of ourselves, right? And that surrender for me was even with contingencies, right? As long as it's not Jesus, like, I'm in, God. There was, I kept kind of having these things there because I truly was wounded, but not by Jesus or God. I was wounded by another person, and that's not God's fault. My relationship today is specific to a reliance upon Christ. Man, it took me years to get there because I kept the door open to God and literally would pray, man, God, I need to know who you are. And I had mentors along the way going, hey, man, don't forget to pray after that and ask God to be okay with whatever His answer is. And that was huge for me because I was all in for God as long as it wasn't the religious God of Christ and all this stuff. I wasn't saying, hey, Christ didn't exist or anything, but like, oh, come on, how can I just kind of fought it for years, man. I mean, I was a guy back before I got sober that would I was like, man, I'm way into spirituality and like the universe, man, and energy, bro, and all that, like, was kind of okay, but I had no personal relationship with energy. How do you have a personal relationship with energy, right? Like, I would talk guys out of their faith. I would try to like disprove why they shouldn't be Christians. And man, I tell guys today that I help get sober, like, look, man, my relationship with God today is very personal, and it has taken a long time to develop this, but it's developed because I've left the door open, and I'm seeking it. I never tell a guy that I sponsor, hey, man, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, because if somebody had said that to me when I came into recovery, I would have been like, man, I can't be here. I will share offline about my faith, personally, but man, I'm just telling guys, look, man, you better believe in something outside of yourself. It says in our book, God doesn't make it too difficult on those who try.
Right.
Yeah,
I struggled with that Jesus for a long time. Don't talk to me about, even when I walked in and saw the word God on the walls, it's like, oh no, we got a problem. If God has anything to do with this, but that was the door that opened up, and I think it's like you say, I believe wholeheartedly without God, and I say God in our lives, I think recovery is next to impossible. I mean, if not impossible. I mean, it's most of the people that I did a blog on. There's a book called The James Club by Dick B. If you like to read, get it. Called The James Club by Dick B. And they talk about the founders and AA, Bill and Bob, that it was found on the Book of James, 1 Corinthians 13, and their philosophy is Sermon on the Mount. And God is God Yahweh, God the Father. It's not the false gods that people are using today. I could go all into the understanding, but we'll do that sometime.
Hey, look, I'm in. Tell me.
I mean, well, so the way I see it is when they say, a God of your understanding, right? Well, when I walked into AA, what was the God of my understanding? It was a God that I grew up with, right? Yeah, I was part of it, definitely part of it, right? But it was a God that I grew up with. He was abusing me, molesting me, right? Beating me, condemning me to hell. I mean, I was done. I mean, that's what I believe. That's God. Why would I want anything to do with a God like that? And then my spiritual counselor in Betty Ford, in one of our group sessions, big whiteboard, he says, if you could have God, if you could have him however you wanted him, let's say, right? What would that look like? What would God look like to you if it was a perfect God, so to speak, right? And so we filled the whiteboard up with nothing but attributes: loving, kind, caring, compassionate, forgiving. I mean, all those things, right? And it was great. It's like, wow. And as he left the room, he stopped at the door and said, "There's your God." Wow. And that is the God that I believe in today, that kind, caring. There was still a lot of work I had to do after that. Yeah. But it was like you say, if somebody, this is perfect, and I'm glad you said what you said. 1 Corinthians 1:18, it says, to talk the cross to those that are perishing is foolishness, but to those of us that believe, it's power. Okay? So to sit there and say, hey, Nathaniel, you're just fresh in the room. Hey, the only way this is going to get good for you is you got to believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm going to pray for you right now that God comes down, the Holy Spirit's going to light your life on fire right now. Wait a minute, dude. I don't know who you are, and I'm out of here, right? And that's exactly how I read that scripture. We have to show people, because this is Christ-centered, we have to show people, without saying a whole lot, the love of Christ. Because how many of us have heard about the love of Christ and then been slapped in the face by the love of Christ, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I look at things. So now my understanding of God isn't that old understanding that I walked in the rooms with. It's this new God. Right? That I have consequences for my behaviors, good, bad, or indifferent, right? But no matter what, he loves me. No matter what, he forgives me. No matter what, he gives me grace, compassion, all that stuff. That's not the God I walked into. That's what I believe they were talking about. That's my personal belief. It doesn't say that anywhere in there, but that is exactly what I believe.
Yeah, I think the illusion, the lie, that I told myself the same thing coming into the rooms around Christ and all that stuff. It was just this false conception based off my experiences, and after that year of recovery, God was pretty ambiguous. It was God, and slowly but surely my spiritual ceiling was hit, because you can't have a personal relationship with an ambiguous God.
Right.
And a friend, was encouraging me along the way, not pushing me, but encouraging me to seek God and ask God, right? You believe in God, right? And I'm like, heck yeah. I mean, beyond believing God, because the desire had been removed. And he said, man, well, God wants a personal relationship with you. Why don't you ask him who he is? Along the way, that kind of nurturing and fostering that stuff. And I would. And slowly but surely, it became pretty darn evident of what I needed and what was going on. And that was what took me to get to that place of surrender and accepting, Christ and Father God and all that good stuff. Then the real work began. The abandonment, right? The molestation, man, I get married in recovery, and within the first few months, man, the sanctification of me is now, hey man, my wife is real frustrated because I don't trust her. And then all of a sudden I'm opening a door going why don't I trust my wife? Right. And then I go talk to some other people and, well, let's talk about your story of abandonment. Let's talk about all this stuff. And, at this point in my story, I know who God is, I think, right? I still have a little unbelief mixed in there, right? But I think I know who God is. And I'm like, how do I trust my wife? And, well, I've got to start by trusting God. If I can learn to trust God, then I can learn to trust my wife. man, there's so many layers to this stuff around our faith and around the recovery. And I was stuck in recovery that at the end of that first year, when I went to move into Texas to work in recovery and mental health, I was kind of like, man, I've arrived, man. I'm a year sober. I've been in 4 steps, and hey, yeah, I had a rough life, and I get that. And the next 3 years, I sat in thousands of hours of counseling, their counseling, not mine,
Right.
and just to be shown like how deep this stuff goes, and how dependent upon God is required for freedom, for true freedom from all this stuff. And I love that you preface that the founders, man, really leaned into James in writing this, and they did. But I think one of the greatest things that doesn't get talked about in AA, in 12-step programs, is how they flipped it, and they took away and added higher power of your own understanding. Because somehow along the way, they realized and saw how many people were walking away from the fellowship as it relates to the wounds that they didn't even know they had, but that's, it's interesting navigating that on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I work I'm contracted at a recovery center on Mondays, and as a spirituality kind of teacher as it relates to the 12 steps. And I try to really honor that space with these guys coming in, either hearing about the 12 steps for the first time, or been through it multiple times. And, I really try to honor that hour of like, hey, you've got whatever you believe in. Great. As long as it's not you, come on in. Right. We'll talk about what that looks like. Cause I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, I'm sure, man, God will show up. All you got to do is give him room,
Mm-hmm.
give him a little space and seek, and he shows up fully, completely, in my experience. And like the book says, man, he doesn't make it hard on those who try. And we've got to just help people keep that door open by loving them and through our actions. I love that the program is attraction rather than promotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Try to love them through and recognize, hey, why am I getting frustrated? Why am I getting irritated by my sponsee or by this or by that? And like, why is my wife pissing me off today by the way she's putting dishes in the dishwasher? Yeah. There's something behind that. And it's not just the way she's putting dishes in the dishwasher, but if I start unpacking that, and this is a snapshot of how sneaky all this separation is. She puts in dishes in the dishwasher haphazardly. There's no form. There's no structure to it. Why does that bother me? Well, because I've learned that if I can do things efficiently, and if I can put things in structured, and I'll get done quickly and bring something to the table. People will see that I'm efficient and a hard worker. B, I'll get done quickly so I can have time to do what Nathaniel wants to do. It's really selfish in a lot of ways, right? And performance based.
Right.
But if I'm not in relationship with God, and because God's got to reveal this stuff to me as I go, right? Am I open? And then I got to turn and go, all right, God, what are you showing me? And I got to go to my earthly dudes that love God too, and be like, hey, this is coming up. Can we work through this together? It's a whole thing that that the 12 steps taught me, that faith without works is dead. I tried just being with God during that period of in and out of the rooms, and I failed miserably because I didn't have dudes that talk the talk with me from recovery to have accountability.
That's the key right there. You got it. My wife and I talk. We do deal with a lot of couples and singles also. But what's a community that you're hanging around with? Show me your community, and I can pretty much tell you what your life is going to be like. With the recovery being a journey, I'll be 16 years on Saturday. 16 years, and the biggest thing that I'm showing, not constantly, but a lot, is new triggers. And some of them, it's like, and what happens is like something happened last night with the way my wife responded to something I said, and I go, why am I responding that way? And it comes to me right away because it gets to that point. And I had a talk with her. I says, then when you respond to me that way, it's the same response I would get from my mother and my stepfather.
Boom.
Right? She's real good. She's such a great wife because she goes, okay, how would you like me to respond? How would you like me to help you through these situations? So we would talk it out. She'd go, okay, that's simple. So it's like, I think a lot of people think it's, like a one and out, one and done. I've done 1 year, I've done all the steps, and I'm done. It's like, no, the steps. The program is it's a life recovery. It's every day for the rest of your life. I mean, you might not be, completely dove into it, but it's still part of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a key component to bring up. I was so worried that my life in recovery would look exactly the same as it did in early recovery, like 6 meetings a week and all these different things, man. And a guy that I trusted, he watched me flounder for years, and he came up, pulled me aside after my final relapse when I came back in, and people were like, what are you going to do different? And I used to always have an answer. And I didn't have an answer on this one because if I knew what to do, then I wouldn't keep relapsing, right? He goes, brother, you got to find your equation, man. You got to find, what's it going to look like that's going to keep you connected to the work, the steps, keep you connected to God, keep you connected to fellowship and community. And don't worry, what it looks like today is going to look vastly different in 6 months. It's going to look even different in a year. It's going to look different, and down the road. And I just think that's vital for guys to hear. If anybody's listening to this and they're feeling like, man, my life is just recovery. I want to have a life. Well, that's what the recovery is going to do. It's going to give you a life. It's going to give you a life beyond your wildest dreams so long as you stay connected. And this is chronic and progressive, man. Those are two real things, right? But as long as you figure out how to stay connected to the source in your relationship with God while giving away what was given to you, but also knowing how to manage your time with home life. And right, if you become codependent and all this stuff, it's just a process. And the 12 steps give you a life, man.
The process is a key word in every aspect of recovery. Every aspect of it. So let's we got about 15 minutes. Or about 18 minutes, something like that. I could go on forever with these. Believe me. I love these kind of conversations. I really do. But I want to talk about the True North a little bit. I know you got 4 different retreats, correct? All right. Can you just briefly tell us, kind of hit on each one and what they're designed for, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. So. Kind of the entry point to the ministry would be, hey, if you want to come out on a weekend, we recommend you come to our Restore weekend. All retreats are going to look the same. The difference is going to be the curriculum. And so a weekend with us, we have a Thursday evening arrival time. And so you do have to take a day off work. We've got years of data now that and alumni that we can point you to ask, hey, if it's worth it or not. You arrive Thursday night to one of our ranches. We have multiple ranches that we use that are all within a 2-hour drive of Dallas. When God told me when I felt God encouraging me, God never audibly told me anything. But when I felt God encouraging me to create True North, we were pretty clear on, this isn't a camp out, right? We're not doing this is how do we get men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to say yes to a weekend. And we want to, take some objections off the table, comfort being one, food being another, right? Accommodations. And so if you go to our website and look, man, the places you come to are over the top. But what you can expect at True North is a curriculum that's going to challenge you into an excavation process with God and fellowship. And it's also going to be a place to rejoice along the way in victory. And so we have 6 sessions between Friday morning to Sunday morning. And the session is me and other leaders sharing about 15 minutes of our experience around the topic. And then there's a mandatory hour of silence on the ranch, and you have workbooks that have scripture and questions based on that topic for that session. And you go be quiet, ask God some questions, and just listen. And each curriculum takes you through a progression to a landing point to Sunday morning, where we try to equip you with tools to actually go back home and use along the way, with the hopes of keeping your spiritual compass aligned on God, so that we can continue in this process that you and I have been talking about the whole time. Recovery wasn't the destination. Recovery was the doorway to the process. And the process is pretty simple, man. The disciples are talking to Jesus, and forgive me, I'm going to paraphrase, but they're talking about the commandments. And there's so many. What's the most important commandment? And Jesus says pretty quickly, love thy God with all thy heart, but equal to that is to love one another the way I've loved you. Randy, I suck at that, right? How come I suck at that? Well, that's what the retreats curriculums are really based around. Right. Man, let's go give God some space to speak to how come I can't pause in the midst of life. Why do I react, or why do I retreat? And there's two things. I'm either going to be defensive or I'm going to be passive in a situation. And our curriculums really center around that. Restore being the first one that addresses identity and fear, right? We do a fear workshop, and then we do identity, who we are as sons of God, and who God is as the Father. The next curriculum is a little deeper work. It's called Awakening. We recommend guys to go to Restore first, because it's going to be a softer landing around the word wound and trauma, because that second retreat, we're going to unpack trauma. We're going to unpack wounds. The first retreat during the fear workshop at Restore, guys that come in that can't relate to my story because it's sensational with the trauma, those guys discover in that fear workshop that they have wounds too, because we don't stop at identifying fear. We ask our warriors to ask God, hey, where did that fear begin? Where's the origin of that story? Well, whether they know it or not, at that point, they probably identified trauma. And so it's an easier ask when they come back to Awakening, when they hear the word wound, trauma, that they can actually do the work around that. We also have a father-son weekend, specific to fathers and adult sons, so that we can do some actual work. And then last but not least is fathers and young sons, which is being developed this year and will launch in the fall. And so we are looking to provide a space for fathers and boys that are, we think, 8 to 13 or 14, trying to get them before the world has completely invaded their space around identity and the different things, to fortify the father-son relationship, so that when this young man enters high school and enters the world of comparison, the thief of joy, right? That they know that their father's a safe place to go back to. And so that would be the goal this year. But I'll tell you this, and I got to preface this: we're not a mental health facility. Right. Okay, we're not there to process this stuff. It happens organically through vulnerability, which we have a few different corporate opportunities for vulnerability. God was pretty clear again on this being a place for me to bring men to, so that God can do the work with them, right? And then as we exit from a weekend, we're able to point men towards pastoral care, towards mental health professionals, right? Towards community of True North Retreats alumni, with the hopes of everything I learned in recovery. Right, I learned all this way of living in recovery. Well, Randy, we know this to be true, but everybody needs to hear this on this podcast. Everyone is in recovery, period. Yep. Okay? 100%. Us alcoholics and addicts, ours is just magnified because what we're in recovery from kills us pretty quick. Yep. Right? And we have so many opportunities of 12-step fellowships and this workshop and that workshop. Well, man, there's the majority, again, of men out there are dying spiritual deaths because the thing they're in recovery from is not under a microscope like us.
Right.
You know, and True North is a place, man, that's going after those men as well as guys in recovery, right? I mean, we have a weekend in February where it's 20 guys in long-term recovery that work in the industry, and we're all going out. God was pretty clear on Nathaniel, you've got to provide a space where men can be attracted to vulnerability, because in that vulnerability is the strength that we know all too well, because we were forced into vulnerability, or I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to die. Right. And it's just been, Randy, it's been really neat. You know, we've done now 3 years of retreats, and God puts who he wants on these retreats every time. No question. Mm-hmm. We have a wish list of guys that we pray about. We've not made ourselves public. We don't market. We don't promote any of that stuff. But it's phenomenal that God specifically puts a couple dudes in long-term recovery on every retreat. You know, we have a mutual friend, Eddie Fisher, that he was on your podcast, and he came out, you know, and what's really beautiful about it is God puts the right guys on these retreats so that the dudes not in quote unquote recovery see a guy like Eddie willingly speak naturally about his fears, naturally about, man, how he misses the mark at home, and how come, and then they go, man, gosh, that's cool that he's that free. Maybe I should try. And what we see is that happen. My computer's about to die. I'm going to plug it in real quick. Sorry, Randy.
It's okay. No worries.
Keep talking. You know, so the retreats, you know, are not just work. Forgive me, guys. The retreats are not just work in these sessions. We've incorporated into our retreats space for rest. Right. Well, we have plenty of free time throughout the weekend for guys to take a nap, man, to go fishing at one of the multiple lakes there, right, to have fellowship. We've incorporated a couple experiential exercises for guys to do things that we like to do that involve guns. Okay, so
I saw that on your website.
Yeah. Like, how do we get guys to say yes to True North, right? If the sales pitch was, okay, man, we're gonna, you know, have 7 hours of silence with you and God, and you're going to excavate and ask questions about fear, and guys are already checked out. They're like, I'm not doing that. Instead, it's, hey, man, we've got a 20,000 acre ranch that we have access to this week. It's an elk hunting ranch. We're going to do a little bit of curriculum, and there'll be a bunch of time for you to go fishing. We're going to shoot some guns. We'll eat some steaks. We might even throw tomahawks. What do you think? You know, guys are like, I'm in. Well, I'll deal with the silence, you know, and, you know, we're kind of baiting and switching them to get them there. But we do truly want True North to be a place that, man, guys feel safe, right? And guys can understand true identity and who we are, and identify these things that get in the way of our process, you know, that most of us are asleep to, because we've fallen asleep here in a place of opportunity. You know, I'm not required to look at the how come in my life, because I can turn to the newest show on Netflix, or because, man, I can go down to the coast and do some fishing, right? Fill in the blank. The opportunity we have here is immense. And so the intentionality it takes to step away and foster a relationship with the Father, that's hard until it's not.
No, it's exactly. And I also like at the very beginning what you said. I believe it helped. You know, it's like, I think Paul said, I believe it helped me with my unbelief. I mean, how many people can honestly say that? You know what I mean? I struggle with it a lot, especially when I see the reality of men, and, you know, the hypocrisy in men, especially in some pastors that I know. And so it's like, really, God? Well, yeah. So,
well, Randy, not to be scripture based, but in Genesis 3, God shows back up to the garden and it basically says to Eve, hey, what happened? The Hebrew purest translation of her response was, he made me forget. He being Satan. Hey, guess what he's been doing ever since then?
Yeah.
Right? Father of lies, man. How do I get these dudes and women? How do I get these terrible humans to forget?
That Adam and Eve story has got so many ties to how people are today. I mean, my wife and I sat, another pastor brought it up to me. We talk about it all the time, you know. But so I know that your population is men, ages anywhere between 20 and 60, correct?
Man, we just had one last weekend, and guys were in their early 70s.
Good,
right? Like it's a mix of it's whoever.
So men from 20 to whatever.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Perfect. So if somebody wants to, I put your website up on the screen here.
Great.
If somebody wants to find out more about you, should they simply go to your website?
Yep. You guys can go to the website. There's a place to sign up for more information that emails me directly. And then my phone number is at the bottom of the website.
Can I put that on? Can I put your phone
of course.
number? Okay, I'll put
yeah,
it on
it's a Google Voice, so
okay, that's fine. Yeah, I didn't want to put it up there without your permission.
Oh, thank you. You're great, man. Yeah. You're great. We're a place again for, man, if you're feeling stirred up as you hear our podcast and convicted around, man, if you're measuring yourself against what you're getting done every day, you might be ready for a True North retreat. Yeah. Now, if you're measuring yourself on, one of the things we talk about on the retreats, Randy, before we close is when somebody asks me, how's my day going? Or how did my day go? God convicted me big time because I remember somebody asking and I go, okay, hold on. What did I get done today? And if I could say that I'd gotten done what I wanted to get done, my answer to how was my day was, oh man, my day's great. Day's great. What if I answered that question? What if you answered that question based on, hey, did I get quality time with the Creator today? Like, if I can say yes to that, then all the other crap that I'm worried about is going to work out.
Right. Absolutely.
So if you guys anybody's stirred up and wants to talk more, man, we got some availability in the fall for retreats, and next year we're here. We want to walk with you, encourage you, and just be a part of the story, man, that ultimately creates intimacy with our Father.
Right on. So, hey, guys, check out the website. I've looked at it a couple different times. And like you said, you can fish. It's not just, like you said, 7 hours of meditation and quiet time. While that's really important, what's important, too, is the bonding time, shooting, trap, and skeet, fishing, playing horseshoe, whatever it is. I think that's key. Fellowship, and that can really help people grow and get closer to God when they see how God interacts with amongst a bunch of men that are on the same path. So
we're gonna get you out. We're getting you out on one, I believe, right?
I'm gonna talk to you. Oh, don't go nowhere, because I'm gonna talk to you once we close this out. Okay, I'm gonna talk to you. I want to come. Definitely want to come. So I'll talk to you once we get done. So. Remember, you get my book, Healing the Wounded Child Within, on Amazon. It's available in paperback, Kindle, and on Audible. My 30-day devotional to wholeness. I got somewhere around. 30-day devotional to wholeness is a great devotional. At the end of every devotional, there's 3 or 4 contemplative questions in it that you can answer. It's great for couples to read together or do by yourself. It starts with a scripture and ends with a prayer. And then I got my 7-day challenge, which is a workbook that goes to my book, Healing the Wounded Child Within. So you get all those on Amazon, paperback, Audible, Kindle. So go ahead, check those out. And then, hey, Nathaniel, thanks, man. I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff with people like you all day long. I love the spiritual talks. I love everything. I mean, we didn't even touch on forgiveness, and that's we didn't even go there. And that's something I used to hate, but I love today. So
Randy, I'm happy to be a part of anything you got going on, man, and the feeling's mutual. So if I can be helpful, and I look forward to us talking offline and our friendship. But man, again, if there's anything I can do to be helpful, Randy, I'm all in.
I appreciate that, and vice versa. Vice versa. So as you get to know me more and more, so I'm sure Eddie talked me down pretty good. No, he did. Now,
well, consider the source.
That's what I got to do. So, anyways, all right. We look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Healing Courageously. Thanks for joining us tonight, Nathaniel. Thanks a bunch, man. It was great.
Talk to you all, Randy. Thank you.
You got it, man. Be right back with you. if I can get this thing to do what it's supposed to do.
This has been Healing Courageously with Randy Boyd. We will have a new episode every Monday. Please like us on iTunes or Google Play. If you would like to know more about the services available from Randy, please visit him at changeyourlifestorynow.com. Thank you for spending time with us. We'll see you next week. And remember, if nobody tells you they love you today, Randy does.